Welcome to our posts. Today we will see stories of r/malicious compliance. Get your manager here so we can talk to you about your manners. Have fun looking for a new job. So my dad had a compactor related story here. Seems fitting that I would have my own to add. My company takes safety very seriously. To the point we have safety briefings on the regular to keep us updated. Yesterday, we had a talk on compactor safety. One of our big rules is to never ever under any circumstances climb into a compactor unless it's unhooked from any power sources. Sounds like common sense, right? Well, dear reader, as you're about to learn, apparently common sense isn't that common. After getting our briefing, we get our assignments and are sent on our merry way. I go to my area, clean it and pull trash. As I'm walking to the compactor, what do I see sticking out of it but two trousered legs? After the shock lasting a nanosecond wore off, I start yelling. "What are you doing, you idiot? Don't go crawling around in there." I know I shouldn't have yelled, but I was so mad. Well, Mr. Idiot fell out and starts yelling at me. "Don't you go yelling at me. Where is your manager? Get them here right now." Malicious compliance mode activated. I put on my sweetest smile and say, "Of course, I'm so sorry. Let's get my manager here." Mr. Idiot smirks and is like, "Good girl." So I call my manager over and ask her to come over. Meanwhile, Mr. Idiot is smiling like the cat who got the cream. I'm fighting to keep from smiling. Because my manager, Miss Heroine, takes safety as seriously as I do. I've seen her reduce full-grown men to tears over safety issues. Miss Heroine shows up and Mr. Idiot says you should train your workers to not yell. Miss Heroine turns to me. "And why were you yelling at him?" "Because I caught him climbing into the compactor and I got scared he'd be crushed." In a nanosecond, Mr. Idiot goes from looking like contented cat to looking like a scolded dog. After a sound verbal thrashing, Miss Heroine calls Mr. Idiot's manager. Within 30 minutes, Mr. Idiot was clearing out his desk, still smelling of garbage. Next story. Oh, I can quit. Not without the final say, I can't. At my last job, my boss, let's call her Kay, hated me. She turned everything into a competition, she mocked me publicly, she took credit for my work, she divulged my personal medical information in front of all our coworkers. She was cruel, and needless to say, I avoided her as much as I could. So, now that the stage is set, here's the context. End of 2020, coronavirus blazing, I had just had my first baby. I was a nervous wreck my entire pregnancy, working from home and being extra careful. After maternity leave, which was disgustingly short by the way, I had returned to the office with some precautions set in place. My boss became crueler to me over those first few weeks back, and suddenly announced that, regardless of any negative feelings toward it, she had decided we all had to attend this training in another state. Keep in mind that there were mandatory 2-week at-home quarantines in place for anyone coming back to my state. But my boss fully planned on ignoring those quarantines and demanding we all would return to the office as soon as we got back. I was carrying a heavy workload and pulling a lot of the weight around the office, and I had some rank. So, I felt fully comfortable expressing my deep concerns to Kay, telling her that it was peak COVID season, and that I had a newborn to worry about now. I expressed I simply didn't feel comfortable going in the middle of a global pandemic and asked if there was a remote training I could attend instead. She firmly, adamantly insisted there was no remote training, and informed me that I could quit if I was that upset with her decisions. It's important to note that she insisted this for weeks, even claiming to have contacted the training organization to make sure. I decided on the spot after that meeting that I would be quitting. But I needed to check my boxes first, which took me a few weeks to figure out. Sometime after this meeting and her incessant insistence that there was no remote training, it finally occurred to me to check with the organization putting on the training and ask them to clarify if there truly was a remote training or not. I did, and lo and behold, there was, and they had been offering it for months. I asked them to email this information to me. Now to figure out how to use this valuable information, right? Wrong. As soon as I stepped back into the office, Kay starts fake empathizing with me out of nowhere, in front of all our coworkers. Saying she really wished she didn't need to force me to go to this training. So, I said, if you feel so bad, let me go to the remote training. She looked at me in surprise, and her face turned beet red. Before she could fight me, I pulled up the email with the information and read it aloud in front of all our coworkers. No one said anything, they just stared, wide-eyed at her while she blubbered like a fool. Long story short, after pulling that fast one on her, I pulled her into a private meeting and gave my notice. She was horrified because, as I stated prior, I carried a lot of the work around the office. But, like she said, I could quit if I didn't like her decisions. Next story. Delete your files and leave. So I have a friend Ted who 6 to 7 years ago was 64 and considering retirement. Ted worked in health analytics for a large metro health organization. He would look at patient data and see ways to improve patient outcomes and gain funding. Each month he would email to the relevant department heads data and links for government grants or funding applications. 12 months prior to this, Ted got a new boss, Sally, who didn't appreciate what Ted did. Sally pretty much ignored Ted except for a simple instruction that all data and reports go to her and no one else. She would deal with it. The organization declares a restructure with lots of jobs losses. They are extremely determined to get this through. Ted is to be redundant. In a meeting, Sally tells Ted his work is useless and he is of no use to the organization. She says she hasn't opened one of his email reports in 12 months, and that clearly shows he doesn't matter to the organization. In 3 months, he will be redundant and receive a handsome package, over a year's pay. Sally was pretty rude to Ted and HR asked her to leave. It is decided that Sally will longer deal with Ted. The union was putting a decent fight and slowing down the restructure. Ted makes the offer to HR that he will not fight the redundancy if they pay him 3 months sick leave and after that is redundancy. They agree but insist that he does a full data clean for patient confidentiality reasons in the next 2 days and then his sick leave starts. Cue malicious compliance. Ted backs up a copy then rings it to delete every file, all on his hard drive and not on a server he was not so tech savvy, and physically destroy his hard drive. He also asks them also to search through any unopened emails he had sent and delete them off the server. It wipe every last trace of Ted from the system. Ted gave the copy of his data to the internal auditors on his last day. On Ted's last day, he also discovered that Sally didn't know he was going on sick leave the next day. She rings with a sweet as pie voice saying, "Hey Ted, I need to look at those numbers you sent me as I can't find them. The auditors say we are 2.2 million short of funding this year and you might be able to help out." Ted replies, "Sure, but ring me tomorrow." Ted leaves and retires happily ever after. Sally apparently could not find Ted's data in the coming weeks. Ted ignored her calls as he was on sick leave. The internal auditors investigated and found that Sally had cost the organization over $2.5 million in funding. At the same time, complaints came from department heads about Ted's redundancy. Someone forwarded Ted an email a couple months later from the CEO stating, after a brief conversation with Sally, she has decided to look for other opportunities. Next story. Don't calculate a table's bills the moment you get their order ticket, it makes it hard to keep track. You got it, boss. Info: this does not take place in the US, Europe, or Australia. This is set in Asia. I won't clarify where since it's not important, just wanted to give you guys context. For starters, I'm 23, a university student working part-time at my aunt's restaurant to make a little extra mullah before the academic year starts. My job is pretty simple. It's an all-rounder job where I need to take people's orders, send tickets to the kitchen, calculate each table's bills, handle payments, and clear tables. I'm currently working part-time as a waitress. I'm only here until the end of this week because I secured another gig elsewhere before the academic year starts, so I figured why not finish this week for a little extra cash before then. I get along with most of the staff, all of whom are a decade or so older than me, and said individuals work at the restaurant full-time. There's another part-timer, 19, who's working here and he comes to work whenever he's able since he's studying too. He wasn't around for a couple of weeks, so I've been left to sort out most waitressing matters. My shifts during lunch hour get particularly busy, which is why my system keeping the workflow super smooth is a crucial point to this post. The moment after bills have been settled, tables need to be cleared immediately because new customers come pouring in and some insist on being seated even before the tables have been cleared or wiped down. I came up with a system in the 3 weeks that I've been working here that works for both myself and my colleagues. Upon receiving tickets for orders that have been received, I always key in their order according to the table they're sat so that it's less time consuming in the event other customers want to settle their respective bills. Customers are expected to come to the payment counter when they're ready to pay, so this system is a lot easier and much more efficient than letting tickets pile up and only calculate the bill right when customers are about to pay, which results in a longer line. I always make it a point to ask customers if their food has all arrived, if they were satisfied with the quality of their order, and if they ordered anything else that I hadn't seen on their tickets. Once they verify their orders are correct, that's all. I go about my day and mind my business. That was until the other part-timer approached me earlier today. His point was an eyebrow raiser, for sure. I'm not the type of person to pick fights or argue, so since he was so insistent that my way of doing things was making it difficult for him to keep track of additional orders at each table, I decided to just let him have at it since he was so happy to tell me how to do my job. I simply smiled and nodded at him, making a beeline to the cleaning supplies and thinking to myself, "You want me to stop punching in people's orders?" Sure thing. For a solid hour or two, I only collected the tickets, bringing them to the cash register and letting them pile up, just as he requested. When I noticed customers stand up from their seats and making their way to the payment counter, I would speed walk to the cleaning supplies and start collecting plates to show that my hands were occupied and that I wouldn't be able to sort out people's bills. I left it all to my dear coworker who tried telling me what to do and how to do it. It was the right call to make because the line that followed, due to his insistence on changing the system, snaked about halfway through the restaurant, full of customers waiting their turn to pay their bill. Once lunch hour had died down, I smiled to myself and went back to keying in people's tickets the way I always had. My part-time coworker sheepishly approached me with new additions to existing orders since then. I hope you guys like this video. If you did, make sure like, comment, share and subscribe the channel or posts.